Hi, I'm Ian Brown, Managing Director of Excelpoint, and you're listening to Onpoint, a podcast brought to you by ourselves. For those of you who haven't heard of us, we're a global leader in the development of no-code technology. We help businesses all around the world to update business processes, overcome challenges, automate workflows, and drive out efficiencies. We do this by implementing innovative, automated, and highly flexible and adaptable no-code software. Typically, we do this around 10 times faster than bespoke software. Today, we're joined by Parry Jenkins. Parry spent the formative years of his career in the world of management consultancy, building bespoke computer systems in the old-fashioned way and rising through the ranks to partner at Accenture. Since then, both as a partner in leading IT companies and as a freelance troubleshooter, Parry has maintained his skills fixing broken IT projects and in fact turning around broken companies. Most recently, Parry has taken up the mantle and the challenge to turn around a loss-making home care charity, Age UK Northumberland. And he's enlisted Excelpoint to help secure the final elements of that turnaround, embedding and automating the necessary processes and changes to ensure long-lasting results. Parry, thanks for joining us today.
Delighted to be here, Ian.
You, like me in fact, have spent decades in this industry. Yep. You've seen it all, done it all, got the t-shirt and risen to some dizzy heights by the sounds of things. Start off by just telling us a bit of your background and your experience and what this industry has done to you over the years.
Okay, late 80s I joined what then was called Anderson Consulting, is now called Accenture, and they had what I can only describe as an excellent enforced learning process. They put us through boot camp in London and Chicago. We did 14-hour days, 7 days a week, and we coded and tested and learned from the ground up how to build computer systems. Later on, we revisited that boot camp to do systems design and even later to do program management and project management. And I went through all that boot camp and later went back and taught all of those elements of that boot camp as well. And in between those training courses, we worked typically 14-hour days at client sites doing exactly what it said on the tin, building computer systems the old-fashioned way. And through the 90s, I built systems largely for the Department for Work and Pensions. And then later on in retail, in the oil industry, in logistics, but it was always focused on systems development and then getting the business to make the best use of those solutions. Very often we'd have training in place for the low-level users, if you like, to data enter into the systems, but what was missing was the board-level insight in how to get the best out of the information that was being assembled for them. And certainly in the early days, in the 90s, the management information that came out of these things was poor.
Yeah. That's interesting because you've touched on something that I talk about a lot, which is stakeholder buy-in at every level.
Yep.
So I'll say to people all the time, a software system is just a piece of technology, and there are many different technologies around the world. Technology in itself isn't the answer.
Yep.
The people have to be engaged with it, whether it's the coal-face workers or right up to board level. Engagement, acceptance, taking that forward in line with the business needs is massive, and that relies on people, not technology. So technology isn't the answer on its own.
Yep.
Together, these things work.
Yep.
And that's what effectively you're describing there by the sounds of things.
Yeah. And certainly, if we drag it forward, we saw 2000 to 2010 the big package solutions, the big Oracle, the SAPs of this world taking over, and they dragged the technology and the usability and the functionality and the management information. They dragged all that forward, but they would stand as islands in a topography of the IT landscape. And then there was still a whole load of manual or spreadsheet-driven processes in between. And in the early days, people focused, I think, simply on getting the most out of the packages. But as we cleared 2010 and moved through the teens of this century, then we see more and more people wanting to join those processes up. And you know, Excelpoint, I think, has capitalised on that requirement and is, you know, does exceptionally well at helping bridge that gap.
Yeah, I've never touched on this in a podcast before, but my background, which goes back 40 years in software development, so rather like yourself, conventional analyst programmer, writing many lines of code, but in the 90s, I think I would say, probably the late 80s into the 90s, software supplier that I worked for, now called Northgate Information Solutions, they had platforms that could build systems without writing code.
Yeah.
And they were really interesting, and they were really rapid. They were effectively billed as rapid application development tools or language liberators in those days. Modern speak, they'd be a no-code platform or a low-code platform. So maybe decades ahead of their time, although I think these things have always existed. So IBM used to have one called System Builder. So I had a very early engagement with tools that could abstract the business requirements, the business functionality and workflow and capabilities away from purely technical people.
Yeah.
And what that really meant was business leaders, business managers, departmental heads could talk to and deal with people who could build things very, very quickly in front of them, and it really shortened the communications chain. So there was not as much, I wouldn't say it was eradicated totally, not as much toing and froing and long gaps in between while coders were doing their job. So interesting, similar experiences.
Yeah, because certainly in the old days, we got clients to expect that enhancements to the system would come once every 6 months.
Yeah.
And now when I need to fix something in Excelpoint, I talk about it to your guys at 10 o'clock, and by lunchtime we're looking at the answer.
Yeah.
It might not be a perfect answer. We might go round the loop a second time, but it's not 4 months to specify a requirement and 6 months to build, and then I'll see it next year. By which time I might have moved on.
People move on.
Yep.
Business requirements move on.
They do.
Business pressures change. So I think during the pandemic, businesses have had to flex, change, or even pivot. So you're right. Longevity of project implementations means that requirement has to stay static or relatively static for a long period of time. And the world just isn't like that.
No.
So I think more agile methods such as Scrum and agile delivery as opposed to waterfall, and agile technologies like ourselves all feed into that landscape to deliver more flexibility in the IT landscape.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So you've gone from the 80s to 2010, 2020. Where does that take you on that journey?
I would say it takes me really through the ranks, managing larger projects and selling larger projects. But I found I'm not a salesman. I don't have the appetite for it, and I don't find it terrible. Financially rewarding, yes. Emotionally rewarding, no. I like solving problems. And so I left Accenture and went freelance. And troubleshooted on some very large projects, again for the Department for Work and Pensions, as it happened. And then I joined Atos and managed their public sector consulting practice, deploying teams to do exactly what I enjoyed to do, though not quite getting my hands on as much as I would have enjoyed. And so I then went back in the last 10 years freelance. And about 5 years ago, I got caught coming out of Tesco's on a Wednesday afternoon wearing short trousers. And the chairman of Age UK decided I had time on my hands and invited me to join them as a trustee. and almost immediately got me involved in their home care business, where I chaired their subcommittee and scrutinised operations. And it was immediately apparent, it was apparent to Andrew before I started that, but it was apparent immediately to me that there were some major problems there. They didn't quite know how or why, but they were losing money hand over fist. They were providing a very good service. They had a good bunch of carers in their home care business, but the management that sat around it, the finances that sat around it were woeful. And I tried as a trustee for about 18 months to get the incumbent management team to fix that. And then when the CEO announced she wished to resign, it had all become a bit too intense. I stepped in as then interim head of home care and now head of home care to fix it. Yep. And I inherited 4 problems basically. Problem number 1, the contract we had to supply home care, which was 95% of our business, expired within 6 months. Problem number 2, we were losing best part of 90 grand a month. Problem number 3, our systems provided information in a woeful state and months out of date. And problem number 4, the volume of staff in our office, half of them were not contributing very much at all. Yeah. Within 12 months, we turned that around, basically. We reduced the head office staff. We recompeted and won a 10-year contract to continue to supply in home care. We dragged our CQC rating up from requires improvement to good. So we improved quality as well as cutting costs. And the final stage is, what I'm now seeking to do is to shorten the period in our financial analysis from good information 6 weeks out of date, when we can finally assemble it, to good information on a weekly basis, not monthly, and 24 hours after the event. You still have to do the work. Yeah. It's very high volume, very low margin. We do 50,000 visits a month. It's absolutely important, that the right carer turns up to the right home and looks after the right little old lady at the right time. We do complex stuff, so complex medical work and personal care, as well as what we call mop and shop, domestic help. Yep. But we still need to schedule those 30-minute or 15-minute sometimes calls throughout the day and overnight, 7 days a week, 365 days of the year, and it's high volume stuff. Yeah. And the devil is absolutely in the very minute detail.
Yeah. So that sounds, just your opening statements. So losing £90,000 a month.
Yes. This year we made a surplus, by the way.
95% of your business could potentially disappear in 6 months' time.
Yes.
Yeah. Overmanned or, let's say, underutilised, one way or another.
Yeah.
Yeah. You faced some serious challenges. And now you said that you've made a surplus this year.
Yes.
So roll that clock forward another 12 months and you've turned the ship around.
Yeah. And of course, somewhere in there, we had a global pandemic.
Yeah.
So for the last 18 months, that's included working from home for the office staff. It's included a mountain of PPE for our carer staff. I'm delighted to say almost immediately we got them all vaccinated as soon as the vaccines were available. Yep. But prior to that, it was PPE intensive. That too just added to the challenge. But throughout that, we typically miss one call in 10,000, and we can't. I'd like to make it 0, but that's probably
impossible to make it 0.
Probably is. Yeah.
Traffic accidents, problems.
Well, it will be an example of we arrive to look after someone. They need hospitalisation. We call for an ambulance. We wait until the ambulance arrives.
Absolutely.
Our call finishes, at 10 o'clock, but the ambulance arrives at 11:15. We stay the extra 45 minutes. Yeah. And sometimes getting a replacement to the place you would otherwise have gone is beyond us in the blink of an eye, particularly in rural Northumberland. Yeah. Because we cover an area of, with a radius of about 60 miles.
Yeah. And Northumberland, I know it well. I love the area from a walking point of view. I can imagine logistics in Northumberland with very short slots. Very challenging indeed. So you engaged Excelpoint, obviously you're going through reorganisation, re-engineering of the business, and started to look at re-engineering of their systems.
Yes.
Would you like to talk a little bit more about
Absolutely. So a large part of our business, I'd said, is getting the right carer to the right home at the right time, every time. And we have a package solution that does that job very well for us. And communicates directly to the mobile phone in the hand of our carer, so that if their rotas update in the last, they get immediate updates. And no, don't go there, go somewhere else. What that system doesn't do so well is all those extra bits that we need to capture that those carers do. So they may come into the office to pick up PPE and we pay them for their travel. They may do some training, they may do some help in the office. They may drive another carer around as a favour to us because the carer's car's broken down, but we only capture the carer who's providing the care information. And so the whole load of information was captured on paper, then passed in for scrutiny and sign-off, and then passed to finance, and then we process it, and then we pay. And it all contributed to the delay in management understanding of exactly where every penny went, and contributed to the fog that existed around the business. And if you consider we are a very low-margin business, we're a charity anyway, so we're not a for-profit, but we do need to cover our costs. And so in a £6 million business, waiting 10 weeks to find out whether April was profitable or not just doesn't work. So what we've got now is we take information from our package system. We have replaced all the paper-based stuff with information entered directly into Excelpoint, and we merge all that together to do all the arithmetic. And it's only add, subtract, multiply, and divide. It's not, but when you're doing it on 50,000 rows of data, it's still, you still need to get it right. And that allows me to see on a Monday afternoon where I was up to, the last 7 days, and take appropriate action as a result. And it also allows me to provide my board with a dashboard of information that keeps them off my back, to be honest, because they can see that complaints are low, missed calls are low, profitability is acceptable, so we're covering our costs, etc., and that we are managing the business. Which then allows us to focus on what we really want to focus on, which is providing, the best quality care we can provide to people in Northumberland.
Interesting. I find that really interesting. It might seem obvious to the audience listening that you're a customer of Excelpoint and I should know all about your project. But as you'll know, I haven't been involved in your project. So that's all quite interesting to me as well. And it sounds like senior stakeholder visibility, so that you can take appropriate decisions in managing the business, was a key outcome.
Absolutely.
And you're achieving that. And to some degree, I'm quite interested in the workforce, if I can put it that way, in the care industry, and not particularly tech savvy. Their job is to deliver the mop and shop and the very complex healthcare issues, etc., etc. So I imagine being faced with another piece of technology is quite a barrier for them. Is that something that you've addressed yet, or it's being addressed, or it isn't even a problem?
It's an ongoing challenge, but bear in mind, my carers are used to getting their rotas on their phones. No one doesn't have a mobile phone these days, certainly no one who works for us, but they're used to getting it on their mobile phones. What we've done, instead of making them fill in paper-based information and then drive 20-30 miles to hand the form in so they can get paid for it. They can now do it nightly if they wish to. What extra did I do today? I did an extra hour of training and I need to claim 15 miles worth of expenses. And by the way, whilst I'm on, I'm going to book some holiday next week. Tap, tap, tap. Some very simple, when does your holiday start? When does it end? Submit. It's a lot easier than booking a flight on EasyJet or whatever. So, the technology's there, and they know that when they press submit, that saves them a journey in and out of the office.
Great stuff.
Then for my managers, it's easy because what they get is a simple table that simply says, these are the 25 carers you're looking at. 7 of them have claimed no extra expenses, but the rest are claiming, 2 hours here and 15 miles there and £4.50 a coffee that they took their little old lady out for, a break, etc. On a simple table, they can just click and approve it all, or if they want to drill down because somebody's claiming £120 there and we better have a look at that, then they can click on that and they get the detail in front of them. So it's made their jobs easier, because the hardest bit in approving the timesheets was getting access to the paper in the first place.
Right.
Particularly during a global pandemic when we're not in the office.
Yeah.
So we have made life so much easier for each step of the way for the carers who have to put the data in the first place, but it's still easier than the journey.
The paper.
For those who have to review and approve, and then for management to know and be able to see an overview of all this and know that it's happening.
Yeah, and I can see straight away how that can cut out a lot of time and cost and effort, whether it's the completing the paperwork in the first place, or the travel time to hand it in, or the collation of all that information, just to be able to sign it off. All that's happening automatically now, and from their mobile.
And even better from my point of view, if they're late in pressing the button, they get a text message saying you haven't done it yet. So we can chase them, and again automatically. So it's not, we've nagged them last week, let's not nag them again. It's like, no, it's automatic. If they're late, they get a reminder. It's a nicely worded reminder, but it's you haven't done it and you need to. And then that means that the management information I have is far more accurate as well as timely, because all those little chases and all those little things that I had to allow for in the past, it says, well, this is probably a 95% sample, so it's representative, but not quite there. It's now up in that, 99 and better.
Yeah, I guess there will also be a number of less quantifiable, less identifiable soft savings, like things like, I would imagine, postage.
Yes.
Paper,
yes.
Printing,
yes,
all the things that go around paper-based processes. It's very easy to look at, well, we can save time on this, we can save journeys and this, but also other costs are saved that weren't even thought about in the first place. I would imagine storage. I'm just thinking out loud.
We still at the moment are a paper-based organisation, and an example I'll give. So in the service users' homes, there are 17 different types of form that we need to maintain. Not all 17 for each individual, but a selection from. And these need filling in on paper and signing on paper, because family members also care for their elderly relatives. District nurses go in. Sometimes other care companies also care for these people, and they need to see the records that medication was administered on time at 12 o'clock that day, so that it's not re-administered at 2 o'clock when the next person comes in. And one of the things Excelpoint has done for us is it knows from our central records which of those 17 forms need to be provided, how many pages, copies, because, well, we go 4 times a day, so we might need 5 pages of this, 2 pages of that. And it automatically produces in alphabetical order by village, so that we can just hand it out and take it, those pages printed in order, clipped together. And we used to have a member of staff that spent 10 days a month doing nothing but stood at the photocopier, photocopying these various forms. Irritatingly, from my point of view, doing it in colour when I wanted it to do it in black and white sometimes. And now it's all automated. It's black and white where it needs to be. It's colour where it needs to be, because sometimes it does. Stapled together. And all we do now is press go, take a block off the thing, share it out amongst those who have to deliver it to the homes. It still needs to get there. But, that member of staff now spends half an hour and not 10 days, and gets it right.
That's a really interesting example for 2 reasons for me. Ultimately, in the fullness of time, and when the organisation and the community involved in the delivery of that care, including the person that's being cared for, is ready for it, the whole thing may go digital.
Yes.
And Excelpoint is capable of that as well. But I haven't come across many examples where I can refer to Excelpoint churning out paper.
Absolutely.
That delivers a massive benefit.
And
it's usually the removal of paper. But that's a really interesting
It is
example.
the icing on the cake that encourages my office staff to want to maintain the data inside Excelpoint and keep it perfect, because if they do, they get the bonus.
Yep.
Or it then feeds them back with the paper-based stuff or anything else that they need back.
Great stuff. And again, you're touching on something that I taught about quite a bit, and that is making sure that at various levels of an organisation, users of systems, not just our system, but any system, have a vested interest.
Yep.
They have an advantage, they have a benefit for putting something into or getting something out of or maintaining computer systems. Because if it's well maintained, you get better information out of the back end. Well,
we have eliminated double entry of data, and it wasn't always double, it was sometimes triple and quadruple entry of data, so we've eliminated that. We type it in once and then we make use of it wherever we need it now. Our industry is very regulated, so we need to maintain meticulous training records. Who's had what training, who's been assessed as competent after the training by supervisions, etc. And it's allowed us to combine what was half a dozen spreadsheets that were never accurate and up to date into a single record for each of our member of staff and a single record for each of our service users, and all the information is there in one place. And where we need prompts to refresh or update or whatever, then the system provides us with a reminder that says you need to do these this week. And again, not only is it compressed the timescales and reduced the administrative effort of it, it's far improved the accuracy.
Great stuff. So you touched on half a dozen aspects there.
Yeah.
And I guess we could still break your existing Excelpoint solution into parts.
We could.
Well, there's a CRM part to this.
Yeah.
There's a scheduling part to this. There's a timesheet part to this.
Yeah.
There's expenses or whatever. So there are still individual business processes and disciplines.
There are.
But that reflects the fact that our platform is a multi-purpose platform.
Yes.
And there could be areas of the business that you've not addressed yet that you could look at in the future and think, we can digitalise that and we can just roll that into being part of our existing system. Do you have anything on the
There are some
futures?
things. There are some things on the horizon. So at the moment, one of the huge benefits is it allows me to take data out of my package solution, absorb it into Excelpoint, and merge it with the information entered directly into Excelpoint, and crunch the numbers.
Yeah.
And that's 50,000 rows. And then so I automate my invoices, I automate my payroll calculation, I automate all those things, which when you're accounting for 15-minute slots of a carer's time, and then 2 minutes travel time to get to the next place, and 1 mile here and 2 miles there, over 50,000. Just takes a little bit of effort to do. And at the moment, what we do is download from one system, upload into the other system. I'd like to get the point where that interface just happens automatically.
Right.
As well, when we take a new package in from Northumberland County Council, it comes to us in an email and it will say, care morning, noon and night, half an hour a slot, 7 days a week, can you take the package? And our contract says we've got 4 hours to make up our minds. And 4 hours is reasonable. We know what we're doing. We can assess whether we've got the carers available and we can schedule it in. But at the moment, the issue is still there. If the person isn't sat at the desk when the email comes in, I can lose 2 hours of that 4 hours until they go, we've had another one. And then they ask the wise person in the corner who can do that scheduling. I would like to automate that link so that as soon as it comes in, it flashes straight up on the screen, as you'd see in a casualty department, that says, this one's been waiting 2 hours and no one's done any with it. This is now getting near the 4 hour mark. And I'd just like to crack that nut. The issue we'll have is it comes in encrypted, and we'll need their permission to decrypt automatically, etc. But it's not beyond the wit of Excelpoint, I'm sure, to do. But it's just, I'd like to, there are a few gaps in the process time-wise where we lose time, and I like to close some of those gaps.
Let's talk about that after this. I'm interested in that problem. Let's talk about that after this podcast finished. So just in wrapping up then, maybe you've spoken very nicely about Excelpoint, thank you very much for that, but what is your overall impression of us, not just as a technology, but as a company, as a bunch of people? We said it's not just the technology, it's the people, us as a company to deal with.
It's been a pleasure.
And be honest.
It's been a pleasure. We've had a global pandemic to deal with, and that's changed the way we work over the last 18 months for a while. And that didn't help. We got around it. We did it remotely, but it wasn't as productive as sitting side by side. I think if I reflect on the experience, I think you should have been harsher with me. You told me at the beginning, I didn't listen. You told me that the best way was to get your guys to develop it, because I wanted my guys to develop it. I wanted to build the in-house expertise. And you said, it's a bridge too far on day one, and I should have listened, because after 2 months of that, I worked out it was a bridge too far on day one. So I would encourage you to press the point more with people who come along who think they know what they're doing, because I thought I knew what I was doing.
And you do, to be fair, you've got a lot of expertise, so you do know what you're doing.
But on reflection, when we knocked that on the head and I worked directly with your guys, we made much more rapid progress. And what I do now have is the in-house capability to maintain and make minor tweaks. But the central processing was quite complex, and it was a bridge too far for my guys as their learning curve.
Your guys, were they technical? Were they from that background?
They were just the two best guys I had available. One had done a little bit of programming in the past. I think he used to work for BT, and he'd done some technical stuff. And he is the guy that will be maintaining our solution going forward, so he has got it. The other guy, not so much. Clever lad, ambitious, understood our business, didn't quite get it. I think going forward, he will continue to be a champion in the use of the solution, but not in the amendment and enhancement of the solution. Understand. And I think now I could draw the line more accurately, and probably where you could have drawn it on the beginning, as to which bits you guys should do and which bits we can do in-house.
Just in closing, and more for the audience, but for you as well, it's quite difficult for an external vendor in the modern world where there is an appetite to embrace citizen developers.
Yes.
For those parties to understand the requirement, not so much of the technical capability, but to have the dedicated time.
Yes.
Because quite often it's somebody that's already got a job to do.
Yes.
The understanding of the entire business process and the permission and validity to go to senior stakeholders and change things or adapt things or whatever, and that takes a certain type of personality, and their own longevity. Because if you build an internal capability and it's one, and that person moves on or is hit by a bus,
it's gone.
There's that side of things as well. We actually had a customer call us up a few years ago, and it was the hit by a bus scenario, and the question was, they developed bespoke code and they developed systems in your product, could you take over the support of the things they developed in your product? And the answer, even on the first call, was yes, that'll be easy for us to do. I wouldn't have liked the bespoke code conversation. So that citizen developer is an interesting one, and I think getting IT functions in larger organisations, departmental developers, business specialists, specific domain knowledge, etc., and getting that working in a way that works well, it goes back to, it's not about the technology, it's about the people.
Well, it has been nothing about the technology,
the business,
in my time with you. It's not been about the technology.
So it's interesting. Interesting. Well, we've talked enough.
Okay.
Thanks for your
I
time.
can talk.
And thanks,
I can talk a lot more if you want.
thanks for coming in. We will talk later because
Yeah.
we'll talk about that particular problem.
Yeah.
So thanks for coming in and sharing
Pleasure.
your time and your views with the audience. And we might do it again in 12 months' time. Who knows?
Okay.